News and current affairs, and today we do two important issues. The first one, raising the Palestinian flag at the UN headquarters. The UN have passed a resolution to allow Palestine, among other non-member states, to raise their flags at the UN headquarters, reviving this important event at its own right, revived Palestine's hope for a full UN membership very soon. Hopefully, inshallah. And our second segment is going to be in our second part, of course, Russia launching airstrikes against insurgents inside Syria in an attempt to support their biggest ally inside the Middle East, Bashar al-Assad and his regime. We're very delighted to have with us Dr. Mehna, the political analyst, and Dr. Hussein Shuriba, the economic analyst. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
And let us first start off with the Palestinian flag, which is raising hopes not only among the Palestinians but among all the Arabs. Do you think that Palestine one day is going to, or very soon, is going to be a member at the United Nations? And what is it going to take? We'll start off with you, Dr. Shuriba.
Well, it's too late, and we got this message very late. It's supposed to be, let's say, 50 years ago, have to be done. And the entire world is made a mistake not to take the Palestinian people and put their flags and their will over there existing before Israel, because it is before Israel. So it's a mistake, and it's corrected today. I think this is one goal for the Palestinians, but the Palestinians should play another role, and that role is to unify themselves into one government, one issue, and one thought, and to start and initiate things for their people. And they should start by their talented people, to show them to the world, whether in any field, whether it's sport, art, whatever, because the Palestinians they are talented people also, and people should recognize that they have professors in medication, in mathematics, in music, in anything, should be analyzed, should be flagged out. And we want the Palestinian to be there. It's not only a flag, it's people. It is the people themselves.
A nation, a recognition, a full recognition of the existence of the state.
In sports, we want to see the team of Palestine there, playing, whether it's a soccer, basketball, whatever the game is. We want them to be there. We want not only for political issue, the flag is there. I don't want every time, I want to hear about only Hamas. Everybody's talking about Hamas. I want to talk about Palestine. I'm not interested of Fatah or Hamas. I want to talk about Palestine, and that's the main issue. So having the flag, thank God for the great effort which has been done, whether from the Arab countries or from other countries out of this regime, just to push for this. This is a good step ahead, and I hope they continue the goodwill. Forget about the selfishness of themselves, because the people who are in power, like in Hamas, they are very selfish. They are not recognizing the important role of Palestine today.
Right. Taking it to you, Dr. Mehna, and exactly the part of the recognition of Palestine as a state. Of course, we all know that Israel and the United States were among, and some also countries of the EU, among the nations and the countries who objected or did not vote for Palestine to raise its flag, which means that they are also against the recognition of Palestine as a state, and which also means that they don't want it a member inside the UN. The United States, in particular, is supporting Israel
quite clearly and frankly,
refusing to recognize Palestine.
Because it definitely, first of all, it highlights the conspiracy that they caused. Because if you go back to 1945, and 3-4 years after that, you find that Palestine was sold by the British to the Israelis during the Protection Act. So the fact here, and Egypt was under the same protection. So when the British decided to move out of Palestine, they found that the land is already being submitted to the Israelis, and the establishment of the Israeli state, or the Jewish state, let's say, because it's a religious state, was already announced. So they continuing on the same conspiracy that they want to keep the division in the Middle East. And I think the Palestine case is the hardest one to really resolve, because it goes back a long way to hundreds of years in terms of, you know, who lived in that particular area and whether Palestinians themselves sold the land or not. So some Israelis, to be absolutely honest, have some contracts that already bought the land. But the fact here is the country as a whole was sold to the Israelis based on a conspiracy led by the British, and the British are following exactly the same take when it comes to the Middle East. So their objection is basically number one, align the conspiracy, because the world will go back. Who already acknowledged the establishment of the Jewish state, and it becomes the British and the Americans. Number two,
the other way around. They supported it strongly.
Absolutely. So, but now the world will remember. Number two, the fact that having the Palestinian flag basically raised at the United Nations headquarters on its way to become a full member, hopefully one day, you know, pushing that well further. I think it's going to put diplomatic pressure as well as international law pressure on Israel to resolve the issue, because now it become basically a full member of the United Nations, and basically all international law points when it comes to self-defense, the right to become a state, independent state, but particularly the right to determine their own future, I think becomes applicable to Palestine. At this moment, they are acknowledging them as a terrorist groups. And as Dr. Shriba said, Hamas is actually increasing that issue, because at this point, if Hamas and Fatah are united, it becomes easier to talk about Palestine as a nation. But at this they both being acknowledged as just groups.
So part of the problem is also Hamas and Fatah.
Absolutely,
not
it's inside.
only Israel and the United States.
No, definitely, but they playing, because Hamas, if you actually go back in history, Hamas was created by the Israelis. Exactly the same way the conspiracy continues. They're creating terrorist groups and then drag the Arab into the conflict. So the fact is, Hamas was created to counteract the efforts of Fatah. And therefore, they taken an excuse, the Western society and Israel take an excuse that they're not united. So how can we negotiate? So if we can get the backyard sorted out, if you like, and the unity between Hamas and Fatah, I think that becomes now an issue to Israel to deal with. So they're not dealing confrontly or frankly with the issue of the Palestinian case. All they're saying that they are divided groups, and therefore we cannot negotiate. And as groups, they don't have the weight on the international, but the nation has a weight. So therefore they keep them divided, so they remain in the eyes of the world as groups and not just a nation.
Dr. Shriba, let me thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for raising that important point, not to undermine the efforts of Fatah as a faction, as a patriotic faction, doing all in its might to be able to unite its nation, but it's only Hamas who is trying always and every day to dissect all the efforts done by all the factions, and of course Fatah is doing its best. So do you think that Hamas is an enemy himself, and it's one of the main reasons before Israel and the United States that is Palestine is not recognized on this, until this very moment we're talking?
Definitely it's one of the reasons. Let's agree on one thing. In 1902, when they decided to create the Zionist and to create Israel, and that was with Rothschild, and that meeting was held, even it was attended by the British, and they agreed that because it was offered 3 countries, not only Palestine, So the Israelis, they were insisting, not Israelis, let's say the Zionists, insisted to have and to go for Palestine, as the Arabs were in a very weak position. They were under the control of the Turkish Empire, and that was very weak in its last days. And the British have managed to, capture all the countries over there, as well as the French.
If you could excuse me, Dr. Shuraiba, we have with us Ambassador Hazem Abu Shanab, member and founder of the Fatah movement, or the Fatah faction. Excuse me, Dr. Abu Shanab, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Abu Shanab, and congratulations on raising the Palestinian flag at the headquarters of the United Nations.
Thank you so much. Congratulations for yourself, by your own.
For all of us as Arabs.
The whole Egyptian people who sacrificed and struggled to support the Palestinian people and the Palestinian flag.
Right. We were talking about the continuous efforts by Fatah movement or Fatah faction to be able to unite all the Palestinians, and that is always aborted by Hamas. And Hamas being one of the enemies to Palestine even before Israel and the United States. Now, in the speech of the General Assembly by President Mahmoud Abbas, he was talking to all the member states of the United Nations, and saying that to all the members who did not recognize Palestine as a state until now, he asked them to do so after raising the flag. And he talked about the efforts that are exerted by the Palestinian people to effect peace and to move on with the peace process, and that is always being challenged by Israel, violating the agreements and not respecting any talks between the two ends. If you can elaborate.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I have to note that I'm not hearing the voice very well, so
okay.
I will
Sorry about
respond
that.
as much as I understood from your question. What happened is that the Palestinians now did succeed in raising the Palestinian flag as a flag of the state of Palestine, which was recognized by the UN Assembly by the end of 2012, which means that this time, in 2015, there was a new resolution by the UN saying that there must be a recognition of the whole international community of the sovereignty of the state of Palestine over the lands which were recognized by the international community during the resolution on 2012. So the situation, the legal situation now is different than before, which is before 2012 there was no recognition by the state of Palestine, even if it is that it is now recognized as a non-member state. So it's a state, but it's not a member in the UN. The addition now is that the international community is recognizing the Palestinian sovereignty over the Palestinian lands, which were recognized in 2020. Practically means that the lands which were occupied by the Israeli forces on 1967 are now recognized and determined by the international community as are the lands of the state of Palestine, and it's the right of the Palestinians and the state of Palestine authorities to cover its sovereignty over these lands. So it's a legal correction to the previous mistakes by the UN and the international community.
Right. Dr. Abu Shanab, what's the next step? The whole Arab world is looking forward and waiting in anticipation. What's the next step for Palestine? Are you working on a full membership at the UN?
Mr. President Mahmoud Abbas did mention during his speech yesterday that we are encouraging and pushing the other countries which did not recognize the state of Palestine to recognize the state of Palestine. This is number one. Number two, we are urging the international community to accept the state of Palestine as a member, a full membership in the UN. Number three, we are, as Mr. President did say yesterday, that we are asking for an international protection from the UN and its access associations which are working to protect the Palestinian people, which is under the occupation of the State of Israel. So we want now a full international protection from the UN states and highly independent states to the State of Palestine, which is under the occupation of Israel.
Right, Mr. Hazem Abu Shanab, member and founder of the Revolutionary Fatah movement in Palestine, would like to thank you very much, and all our best wishes for you, our brothers, the Palestinians. And going back to you, Dr. Shuriba, we were talking about the real enemies for Palestine. Of course, there are very clear enemies, which are Israel and the people who are supporting Israel, or the Israeli government in particular. But you talked about other enemies.
Yes.
If you like to continue.
I would like to use another word. I would like to use not enemies. I would like to use people are abusing and using me as a country, which is much easier because we have recognized Israel. So we will not go into details of this. Israel is a country recognized by Egypt, and we have a peace talk with them. But they are abusing and using lots of things. Some of these things is from our side, and that's the bad part of it. Why? Because when you use Palestinian against Palestinian, that's a wrong thing. So when a Palestinian allows himself to be against his people and his country, that's a bad thing.
Isn't that what's going on in Iraq and what's going on in Libya and in Syria?
This is what...
that's the crisis, the main crisis in Syria.
Well, my dear, it was going to happen in Egypt.
In Egypt, right.
Thank God for the Egyptian army. Thank God for our people and visions. The vision of the Egyptians. Some people think that Egypt does not aware of democracy, and that's one of the bad mistakes. They have done it outside. They thought Egypt doesn't have a democracy, and they had better know that Egypt was having a democracy before any country worldwide had a democracy. So Egypt is a democracy country. Once we come to the weak point, our democracy starts up and wakes up and push up to the target we want. So the Palestinian, we come back to the Palestinian, and we have to ask them, please recognize that you are only Palestinian. You're not Fatah, and you're not Hamas. You are Palestinians. You have to stand for your country. You have to stand for your rights. You have to stand for your people. Egypt, which we have right now today, after both revolutions, are standing right now for two things: the people and the future of the Middle East.
That's true.
Yes, this is the important thing. When you find Egypt standing in the United Nations asking for fighting terrorists, it's not fighting terrorists in Egypt, because these terrorists are right now expanding everywhere. If you go to Europe, I had a colleague, and he was in Germany, and he went to Austria, and he told me just they were having a bomb in the metro, the main station, train station there. Why? Because terrorists, it doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have
a system, unified.
A system, or you can identify. He's a normal person. So we have to do and look for the benefit of the people. Whether you are from Europe, from Egypt, from Africa, from Asia, from the United States, from anywhere, we have to care about youth, which is our president have mentioned this in his speech. He was taking care about youth, because other people are using these people against the perfection of the world. We do have a problem. Europe has a problem today. We need to focus on one thing. How can we support our young generations with good ethics, very good understandable manners, what you call a hope for the future, because this doesn't have right now. Europe or the United States, they are spending lots of money on military industry and all these things. We have to minimize, ask them to minimize their involvement in this to the minimum, because it's expanding every day.
Right.
We have a problem, not because of them. We have a problem because also of us. We want to work and easy things, and that's a problem for us. We need to focus. How can we help?
We wanted the easy way.
Yeah, we need to help the young generation to think positive future. The economy will not develop with the guys like us. We have done our homework.
Hard work.
It's a hard work.
I'm afraid our time is up with our first segment, so are we going to go to a short break, or are we going to go to a short break, or are we going to continue? Well, I guess we won't be going to a short break. We're going to start off with our second segment, which is okay. So we're going to go to a quick break, and we'll come back to you. Russia launching airstrikes against insurgents inside Syria. What's the full story? Please join us after the short break.
Be the first to know. The news live at the site of the event. Information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, it's Nile TV.
Welcome back. Our second segment is talking about the Russian airstrikes against the insurgents inside Syria. Of course, Russia is attempting to support its biggest ally, like I earlier said in the intro, inside the Middle East, Bashar al-Assad and his regime. But actually, the airstrikes or Russia supporting is not actually supporting al-Assad, or that does not mean that al-Assad is going to remain or not stay or leave, but mainly it means that the state of Syria, and when I talk about the state of Syria, I talk about the Syrian army, is going to remain intact, and it's maintain its strength, unlike the Iraqi army in the what happened in Iraq in 2003. It collapsed by the American or the U.S. airstrikes. So there is a big difference that Russia is going to inflict here by the airstrikes, and we're going to shed some light on, of course, it's the second day, Dr. Mehna. Russia is launching airstrikes against the insurgents in Syria. Of course, this came to the discontent of the United States, who is already launching strikes against Syria.
Yep.
And claiming that they are launching airstrikes against insurgents there. They are helping some armed revolutionaries,
and
but launching airstrikes against another armed. So they are, I don't know how they can figure out who is who among the airstrikes.
They don't figure out. It's a double standard approach. The fact that the United States is aware of what's happening in Syria, they're aware of ISIL or Daesh from the beginning, they're aware of their distribution in the army, and we've seen before when they threw weapons from the aircraft and suddenly it became in the wrong hands, you know, claiming that they didn't know that was Daesh that they got the weapons. So the fact here is the United States is playing a double standard as usual. The fact here is, and also confirming what Dr. Shariba said, is in 1902 as the beginning of a plan. The strange thing here is that we are aware of the plan, yet we just fall into it. This is the strange thing. We know the fact that the Zionism groups are basically establishing a state, yet it took us 40 years to figure out that they're already doing it. The fact here, again, we know that the terrorists are supported by the United States and their allies. Russia is protecting its own interests. So just before we get into the airstrikes, Russia is trying to get into the warm waters because there's a lot of energy. We're talking about 40% of natural resources in the world are in that particular area, number one. Number two, Russia is playing a role here trying to get into the Middle East because of economic investment as well as establishing a deeper security into Russia because the United States has already invaded Europe. Through Ukraine, through Georgia, trying to get into the borders. Now there is allies or an agreement between Iran and the United States, and that's really worrying Russia because it's on the Russian border. So therefore, Russia is trying to take the fight somewhere else, or the clash with the United States somewhere else. So they take it into the Middle East. This is the battlefield that we live in. It's already the playground where they all play.
And where does that leave Iran in the middle? I mean, with Russia or
it relieves Iran. It relieves Iran for later.
It strengthens Iran.
For now, but Russia can conflict with Iran. They still have an agreement, economic and also weapons. But again, there is a deal among the three. But the fact here, the airstrike supported by Russia or initiated by Russia is basically, number one, to protect the Russian interest in the region, to remain existent in that particular region as a major power that can basically manipulate the situation. And yes, it's useful for us, but we need to understand that they're doing that for their own benefit. We need to understand that, number one. Number two, the fact here is that, as the news was saying, that there is a clash between Obama and Putin that took place in New York over Syria. And we know that Russia has a military base in Syria, so they are, again, they're trying to protect the military existence in Russia. The spread of Daesh in Syria, I think, is going to have consequences on other allies in the region, and it will expand into the control of Russia into the Middle East. So they're trying to minimize that, and at the same time, as a result, to minimize the control of the United States in that particular region, because they cannot stay silent and keep the United States have a free ride in Syria. So I think the existence is really to deepen the national security, Russian national security into Middle East. Number two, take the fight or the confrontation with the United States into the Middle East away from the Russian border, because they already played on Georgia and Ukraine. And again, in the end, they're going to have an agreement among them to basically, leave Georgia and leave Syria, and that's how it's going to happen. And we've seen that in Iraq. Iraq was supported by Russia in the beginning, and then the whole thing just collapsed. So the fact here, we need to understand or look at the world that it works on benefits. It doesn't really work on brotherhood.
So they're trying to recorrect the scenario of Iraq, but this time it's in Syria.
Absolutely, because it impacted negatively on Russia afterwards. It shrank their movement out. So I think they extended their existence in the Middle East through Syria.
Right. Apart from those very important points that you raised, Dr. Mohanna, Russia entering the scene, I mean, that's the civil war inside, Russia entering the scene of the civil war inside Syria is going to change the scenario dramatically. Now, that is going to transform the scene of the civil war inside, and it means that Russia and the U.S., we have to keep in mind that there are two parts now, they will be no longer attached from the conflict or lines of the conflict. There are going to be two players in the scene, and their full engagement might mean that the war will be brought to an end earlier because Washington and Moscow will won't be having greater control over their allies here and there. How is going to be the scenario is going to be in the coming days, because it's improving or escalating rapidly?
Well, I want to bring one thing, both United States and Russia, both of them. If they are doing something, it is for their own sake. It's not for Syria's sake. It's not for the Arabs. It's not for Russia only or United States only. They want to gain something. So this is a clear point for us. The Arabs, all the Arabs, are always in a negative way. Because
watching.
No, not only watching. Like a country like Qatar. It's one of the worst Arab countries. It's not because it's Qatar, because the ruler over there, he doesn't have a vision, and he is just following what is being dictated to do.
That's true.
Another country like Turkey, they tried hard to be member of the European Union, but they failed. She tried again, Turkey, to be the leader of the Arab countries against Europe, and they failed. So the conspiracy on the Arab countries again from both rulers like this. So now it's the time for the Arab. Wake up, stand up, be like, what's the vision which is being done with King Faisal and President Sadat? Please recognize this. Both of them, they have recognized the wealth of the Arabs. Al-Assad was one part of this. So we should not forget this. If I'm having a disease and I have no choice except that I have to take this poison to clear the disease from me, I will have it. This is the time we have accepted Russia to on a clear stage, because Russia was there, is in the field of Syria, whether you like it or dislike it, whether it is announced or is not announced. So giving back a punishment to the United States, because the United States have given them a real punishment, even in economy-wise. They squeezed the Russians in economy. Right now, Russia will not allow the gas which is moving out of Qatar to Europe, because it is supported by Daesh and others. So Russia is not doing for the benefit of only Syria. Russia is one of the big countries exporting gas.
Do you think part of it that Russia is flexing its muscles?
No, it's not flexing. It is always showing that I am another power existing.
Another power or the main power in the region?
No, it's another power. It's not. There is no main power. It's another power. I want to tell you, Putin is a replica of Khrushchev, not Gorbachev. This is a big difference. Khrushchev was very tough person in Russia, and the United States was aware of him, and they know that he is up to his word. So Putin is that style. Gorbachev was the one who squeezed the Soviet Union. So this is why Putin is another style, and he's the old style, old-fashioned style. We have to recognize we want the Arabs right now, today, wake up. I think our President Sisi is giving up a vision. Let's unite it, let's think positive. Even our vision is different than Saudis, but we need not to have another Iraq. We need to stop losing our people. Lots of millions are being killed in Syria. Lots of women is vanished.
Is evacuated.
The picture of the kid, which was, his body was floating and coming to the borders of another country. It's a mess. So we need to think positive for Syria. And I think the best person right now, even he's the worst. I'm not saying that he is good. It's Al-Assad himself. Why? Because he is aware of his country. Maybe after 2-3 years, he can go out. He can leave the country, but you need to put Syria back as it's Syria, but not Syria divided into 4.
Trying very hard to pull themselves together.
So support Syria. I think Russia is doing something. We think it's positive for our side, because Syria is the backbone of the strategic security of Egypt, by the way.
We only have like around 5 minutes left in the program in our second segment. We'll try to invest it the best as we can because this is a very hefty issue. Dr. Mehana, does the attacks of Russia that is launched by Russia, today it's the second day I believe, does it raise another dangerous prospect for both the US and Russia running airstrikes at the same time without coordination? What is it going to look like inside this poor country? I mean, it's going to be an ugly chaos.
No, there is definitely coordination because the two countries cannot afford mistakes in the actual conflict. If they attack each other, there could be airstrikes, shooting at each other. So definitely there would be coordination. And if you actually go back to the actual statements, official statements of the two countries, the fact that they are both fighting the wrong people, you know, the bad people, let's say. So each one has his own bad people that we don't have of. You know what I mean? So each one of them is describing his own bad people that he's fighting. And the fact here is, we, as Arab, as a weak nation that doesn't have any integrity whatsoever, we're providing them with the playground. So we've got two teams basically facing each other in a soccer game, and we're giving the background. So in terms of coordination, no, there would be definitely coordination because they cannot afford mistakes. Even when it was a conflict in Ukraine or in Georgia, there was coordination. So why? Because they don't want to get into an actual direct confrontation. So in terms of coordination, no, definitely there would be always a coordination. Number two, as we said earlier, it's for their own benefit. It's for the existence of Russia to actually get into the warm waters. I think the consequences here is worse for the Arabs because now we've got another dimension added into the conflict. We've got now freed from the 5+1 because they already have a settled agreement. So now they have a free ride to support Houthis and support the different groups they play. Qatar on one side, Turkey on the third. So we already got three inside powers to keep the Middle East divided. On the outside, we've got powers that basically invading different parts. So we had NATO destroying Libya. We had the coalition destroyed Iraq. Now we've got United States and Russia beating or damaging the entire Syria or whatever is left of it. So the fact here is we've got one window open, which is the reform of the Arab League, and the Arabs to stand up, as Dr. Shriba said, but we can only stand up through the reform of the Arab League, its constitution, because the constitution of the Arab League was actually written by Eden, the Prime Minister of England, before the Second World War. So the fact here is the Arabs will have to take a stand to basically say, now enough is enough, this is really becoming too much because the Arabs have no say. You're playing on my ground without even consulting me.
Right. Dr. Shariba, like I earlier mentioned that some are attacking Russia or accusing them of flexing their muscles and actually on the global geopolitical stage. But Russia, the Russian officials say that they are preventing another Libyan scenario or another Iraqi type scenarios where the secular jihadist militias are deposed through the Western-led interventions and breeding grounds for terrorism and militias and everything. So how do you see the Russian side or the Russian, and is it like Dr. Mehna said, it's the same like the American, or the Russian end is clear and sharp and they know that what they're doing, their target, and also in their sincerity in supporting the Syrian state?
Well, for Putin, I think he knows what he wants. And
what is it that he wants?
What he wants the same punishment to what any person have given him the punishment.
Okay.
Okay, this is very clear. But in the meantime, this punishment is only for the sake, it will come for the sake of the Syria and the Arabs. There are countries are not able to understand, or
the Sunnis.
Well, especially I'm talking about the Gulf area, which these people are our supporters, and they are very good with us, and we agree 100% about their vision. But they have to clear one thing, and they have to put one thing: we do not want another Iraq, because Iraq is being weakened because to make the Iranians powerful. And that's a weak point for the Arabs. And when you have a weak point in Syria, you have another second weak point. There's a prime minister in Israel. He said, if you want to finish the Arab countries, try to weaken 3 countries. And he said, Iraq, Syria, then Egypt. Right now they finished Iraq. Syria is on the way, but it will not happen. It is waking up and giving a hard time to them and pushing back, and we will stand for this. So, my dear, I think we have to think about not Daesh and not Taliban, because both of them is being created either by United States or created by the Russians. Whatever who is who or who is from who, we are not interested in them. They do not represent Islam. They don't represent us. They do not represent the Middle East people. Because in Daesh you find people coming from Europe. In Taliban you find people coming from Australia. And so this is not us. So we as Arab stand up for your rights. Nobody should play on your ground, whatever he is, and you have to finish them out. This is Egypt. And this is why we need all the Arabs forget about our tiny mistakes.
And our egos also.
Yes.
Right. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Dr. the economic analyst, and Dr. Mehna, the political analyst. I'd like to thank you very much for your input, and there is where we end this edition of Windows and Current Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us. Please do join us again next week. Until then, that's a goodbye.